Hello, everybody. Welcome to Zone Defense. Be sure to follow us on Spotify at Zone Defense Podcast, on Twitter at Zone Defense Pod, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Zone Defense Podcast. And be sure to ring that bell to get post notifications. Also, smash that like button and drop a comment down below and let us know your thoughts on today's topic. Today, Chris and I will be doing another edition of the Zone Defense Basketball Hour. How's it going, Chris?
It's going good, Drew. I'm really excited to get into this again. I enjoyed our talk last week about, just bringing up some different cool things that have happened or just interesting things that we think to start the season. But, now that we're doing it weekly, we can kind of get into some more nerdy stuff. We could talk about how good Kelly Oubre is, or, we could talk about these random players. Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. He's not great, but that was just the first player that came to my mind. I'll jump right into my first point here, just start it off. And, this one, this topic may be a little bit biased for me, but, I think it's something that definitely needs to be addressed. What on earth do the Portland Trailblazers do now? Did this team, they've got a couple games scheduled or rescheduled because of COVID, maybe in their best interest right now, because they are down, I would say, their second and third best player, obviously their second best player, maybe even arguably their best player so far this season, CJ McCollum with the foot fracture. He's going to be missing, I would say upwards of 6 weeks, most likely. I know they said maybe he will be evaluated in 4 weeks, but that just doesn't sound very promising, the word evaluated. So I'm assuming this is a 6+ week injury for CJ. That's a big problem for them. This is a team, like I said, they're missing their third best player, Yusuf Nurkic, with wrist surgery. So they're missing two, I would say, one definite all-star, and then another, I would say, above average center, at least in the NBA. He's struggling a little bit this year, Nurkic was, but he's still really good in the pick and roll with Dame. Better defensively than Cantor as well, who's their backup. And it's already becoming, you could see it when they played the Spurs earlier this week on MLK Day. It was a problem. Their defense, already can't stop anybody. They really can't stop anybody now, man. This is maybe the worst defensive team in the entire NBA. And now they're down, a ton of scoring. These are two dudes that combined average over 40 a game. This is big time scorers for this team. I would, like I said, probably their second and third most important offensive players on the team. It's a big problem, man, and I don't really know what they should do from here. But I'll let you kind of jump into it, and then I'll keep going with what I was going to say about them. But what do you think this team should do, man? It's a problem.
They need to get the scoring from somewhere else. I do like, they have Gary Trent Jr., not a bad player. They got Melo, who, yeah, he's old. He's not the same Melo as he was in his prime, but he's still a decent player. So I'm not too worried about them finding a way to replace McCollum and Nurkic's offensive output, because they also have Enes Kanter too, which I think offensively that him and Nurkic are pretty comparable, at least this season. The real problem is, as you mentioned, there's defensively. Robert Covington, when is this guy going to show up? He has done literally nothing. I'm looking at his stats right now. He's averaging 6.5 points a game. What? He's averaging under 6 rebounds, which isn't bad for a small forward. Less than 2 assists, though. Steal and a half, which is expected from a defender of Covington's caliber. But offensively, he does nothing. And I think he does have a next level. Last year in the bubble and really the whole season with the Rockets for the most part last season at least, he looked really good. I think he was with Minnesota before Houston as well. He looked good there. So this is a guy who has a ceiling, and I think not a ceiling. He has more potential. He has greater amounts he can get to in terms of offensive output as well. So I think that's really, really important. If he gets his confidence going on the offensive end, I think that'll carry over in the defensive end, because he's a really good defensive player, and I think he can make up for what they lost in McCollum and Nurkic as well, which neither of those guys were tremendous defenders either. But in terms of going down low, Enes Kanter, he's always been a big question mark defensively, and that's just going to carry over now more than ever. I think Harry Giles too. This is a guy who had a lot of potential coming into his NBA career, or out of high school, and then he had a ton of injuries in college, a ton of injuries in his early NBA career. He spent last year with the Kings, was a decent player off the bench. Hasn't gotten a ton of playing time this season, but he could be a guy that maybe he's an X factor and he can come in. But that's really the only things that they have on their team, and that's why I'm saying that there's not a whole lot they can do. You mentioned their defense. It ranks, I believe, in the latter half of the league, a 25th ranked defense in terms of points per game allowed. So I think the big thing that they have to do is go out and get a guy. And I know Andre Drummond's name is floating around there. In terms of contracts, I think Drummond would be a great add for them. But in terms of contract situation, I don't really know how they're going to make that work. I do think a possible target, though, would be another Cavalier, JaVale McGee, who I think would be able to give them a little more something. He at least works hard defensively, isn't a great defender, but he's decent offensively, can be working the pick and roll with Lillard. I think that could be a potential target because the Cavs are trying to get rid of centers because they have Jared Allen, who's looked really good in his first few games with Cleveland. I think they could potentially get JaVale McGee. But like I said, offensively, they get a little more from Covington. I'm not too worried about them in the short run, assuming McCollum's able to come back at least at some point this season. Defensively, though, it is the big concern. I think they're going to need to make a trade and get either a center, another guard. They just need something, really.
So, yeah, I really like the a couple of names you brought up. I mean, I think Drummond's really interesting. Despite me trashing the dude for being, a guy that isn't always out there hustling, I feel like this would be a perfect environment, with a guy like Dame, a great leader. Maybe he can get like his, he's never really been on I'll give him credit where he's never been on a team where he's really been and put in a good situation. I mean, the Cavs they're finally decent this season, I guess you could say. It's still early on. We'll see how their final record ends up. But this team at least plays hard. It looks like he's playing a little bit harder this year, I'll say for sure. But I mean, he played with the Pistons with the losing culture for a while. He was on the Cavs last year. They can't win either. I mean, this is a dude that's never really played in a culture like this, and I think the Blazers are a better environment for him. And I like a guy like JaVale McGee as well. I think that would be an interesting energy guy just to, fortify their big situation. Because Cantor, he's playing good offensively. He's a really good offensive rebounder. But, other than that, he's not as good of a screener as Nurkic. So that might be a little bit to do with Nurkic's big frame. But, Cantor also can't play defense to save his life. So, that's a big time problem. You can hide a lot of the defensive flaws with a good rim protector like Nurkic, which I think he is a good rim protector. Cantor, not so much though. I think he allows a lot down low, but I mean, he's definitely you can't knock his effort out there. I do think Cantor's a guy that works hard, but I think they need to add another guy, a couple other guys that I think are interesting for this team to add. A Larry Nance potentially, I think is a guy, like an undersized center, the guy that can play the floor a little bit. He provides some outside shooting. I think he's interesting. He's leading the league in steals right now, actually, too. So I mean, I think that's a guy he's a good defender. I think Nance is a good underrated player, and they have a lot. Like I said, they got a lot of centers, a lot of wings. So, I mean, they need to trade somebody at some point. And it could be potentially a guy that they end up dealing when Kevin Love comes back.
Yeah, I like that too.
A couple other guys that would be interesting. LaMarcus Aldridge for some offensive scoring. He's been hit or miss for the Spurs. Probably wouldn't take a ton to get. But, I mean, the Spurs, I'm not sure how interested they are.
That's another contract thing, though. Like, he's making a lot of money. So the Blazers have to find a way to make the money work.
Right. It would be a problem.
Yeah.
And also, and we kind of touched upon this before, it wouldn't help their defensive situation at all. But Marvin Bagley could be another interesting trade target for them as well. I'm not sure how that one will work either, but I do like the Drum potentially McGee or Nance. Anybody on the Cavs pretty much. I mean, they got a ton of wing players, so any of those guys. For me, I mean, this is a team. I mean, the West is so competitive this year. I mean, right now, that they're in the playoff picture, fourth in the West, but they're tied or around, they're hovering around, it could be out of the playoffs with a couple losses here in a row. And I mean, they have an easier stretch of games coming up, but I really think it's going to take, bubble Dame, last January Dame like numbers for them to stay afloat. I think this dude's got to average 35 plus. I'm not going to lie. And he's already doing it. I mean, 2 games, he's had 36. I believe he had more than 36 each game. I'll go check it. 35-36 his last 2 games, and that was one half without McCollum. The other was a full game without McCollum. I mean, this dude can flat out go get buckets when he needs to. And when McCollum's out, this is a guy that scores a ton of points. I think we're going to be talking about him and if this team is still, afloat when those two come back, I think we're going to be giving Dame some MVP love. And maybe that's a little bit personal bias, but I think he really deserves it when he carries this team. There's still a playoff contender. I think he deserves some MVP love.
And fortunately for them, they don't have a super hard schedule coming up. They have like the Knicks, the Thunder, the Rockets, the Bulls, 4 teams that I think they are clearly the better team, even without CJ or Nurkic. They got back-to-back against the Bucks and the Sixers. That'll be a tough game, but then they get the Knicks, Hornets, and Magic all back-to-back, and that takes us to mid-February. So there's a roadmap here, as we like to say, for them to stay afloat. And we're talking about them defensively, but I thought you brought up an interesting point there when you mentioned Bagley. I mean, they could just go out and get another offensive guy as well and just go all out just try to win games 150 to 140 and just say screw defense, we're just going to outscore you. Because I mean, Dame's obviously top 5, definitely top 10, arguably top 5 player in the entire NBA. And I think he's got the potential to carry a team for a stated amount of time. And if they get some more offensive pieces around him, I think that could prove beneficial, at least for the time being. I mean, this is a team going into the season, I think they had some title. Maybe they sneak into the Western Conference Finals aspirations. Right now, the way it's constructed without a defense, that's not going to happen. But maybe they make a few moves here. Maybe Victor Oladipo, another potential guy. By the sounds of it, he doesn't want to stay in Houston long term. So maybe they make a move for him too. It's the big concern though is just like making the money work, because they have a lot of money tied up in a few guys, and some of the guys they're rumored to be going after. They make a lot of cash as well. So it'll be interesting to see what they do though. Gary Trent Jr. too. I think that could be a potential X factor if he gets a little more run. He was also, you mentioned bubble Dame. He was a really good guy in the bubble as well for the Blazers. So he could be a guy that's real interesting.
I mean, yeah, you got those guys. I mean, obviously Melo can provide some scoring punch off the bench. He's clearly not the same player he was back in the day, but this is a guy, they sign him for cheap again. I think he's a really good fit on this team. Doesn't play a lick of defense whatsoever, but having him come off the bench, he always provides big buckets in the fourth quarter as well. Honestly, I think he's really improved his spot-up shooting game. That's been a big part of the offense for him. A lot of scoring on the catch and shoot as well. It's a guy, I like Melo. I like watching him play. So he could be a guy that steps up. Anthony Simons, late first rounder a couple years ago that they took kind of to back up Dame. He's like kind of a combo guard. He's got some size. I think he could be a potentially interesting player to step up as well. I know he's starting to get a little bit more minutes. Rodney Hood. Another guy, coming back off the injury, he actually has stepped in the starting role pretty nicely as well. He had that 20-point game or whatever a couple of games ago. A guy that has always been a really good shooter, and a guy that can kind of take some of the pressure off Dame if he's hot too. So I think a lot of these, I think it's going to take a group effort, but yeah, like you said, I think they're going to be fine on the offensive end. I think it's more concerned just overall with their defense.
Yeah,
and even without McCollum, their offense obviously takes a massive downgrade without McCollum. They can still score the ball though. Right. And then, but I think their defense, becomes more to the forefront when they aren't quite as good offensively, I guess. And then maybe they're potentially, if they go on a losing streak here, going to be on the outside looking in. But we'll have to see about that. I think it's going to be very interesting to see.
Fortunately, though, like I said, they have an easier schedule coming up. But we'll go from one with a Pacific Northwest team that's been a little struggling, maybe only down and down, to a Pacific Northwest team that I think has been incredibly under the radar for me as well. I mean, this was a team that we both were low on in our NBA season previews. And that's the Utah Jazz. I mean, they're standing at number 3 in the Western Conference, firmly in third spot. They're only half a game behind the Clippers and the Lakers currently, which would be the top seed in the West. So they've been off to a really good start, and really just no one's talking about it. And we were actually talking before the episode about like why are some teams that are maybe not as good entertaining to watch, and why are some teams that are really good not as good to watch? And I think it's for the Jazz, it's the same thing as been the last few seasons. They're a defensive first team. They're not entertaining to watch, but they grind you out. I think that's why they're not noticeable. Because currently, in terms of points per game, they have the 3rd best defense in the entire NBA. And then in terms of offensive, Donovan Mitchell got to a little bit of a slow start. I'm not sure if you saw, Chris, the Shaquille O'Neal straight up called him out to his face on Inside the NBA, and Mitchell said, "Yeah, whatever. I don't really care what you think." So he's averaging almost 25 points a game. So he's leading the way offensively. Jordan Clarkson's averaging 17 points a game off the bench. I think he's the 6th man of the year favorite at this point, and that was a guy that people were kind of questioning. Could he be a guy? Does that really mean anything? I know we were both concerned about their bench, but Clarkson's really been carrying the way there off the bench. And they also got Mike Conley too, who's had a really, really bad year last year after the big offseason move that got him to Utah. But this year, again, under the radar, he's got almost 7 assists per game, steal and a half a game, averaging almost 17 points a game. He's been a really solid facilitator, been given easing the offensive burden for Mitchell. And then Bojan Bogdanovic too. He's gone off to a really slow start. So if they get him going a little bit, there's still a potential. There's even more potential for this team if he gets going, because he's had a relatively slow start. And then you got Rudy Gobert, who you already know with him, almost 3 blocks a game, averaging a 12 and 10 or 12 and 13, excuse me. And this is just a team, like I said, they're not the flashiest team. but they're gonna grind you out defensively. I think they're near the top in the league in both rebounds and blocks per game as well. And offensively, they're no slouch either. Ranking in the I think the top 10, top 15,
yep.
top 15. They're tied for 12th right now in terms of points per game. So right there as well. Their offensive is a little bit better than it was last year. Their defense is still elite. And that was even something that I know I had concerns about was Gobert, is he going to decline? Is this defense really going to be still as good? And they really have stepped up to the challenge. So they played really well. And I'm not sure how you thought about them, Chris.
Yeah, okay. So the Utah Jazz, this was gonna be one of my points. Actually, I edited one of mine because I figured you would probably talk about them. I was gonna bring them up if you didn't, but I kind of edited one of my later points, so I'll talk about that later. But I think this is a team that is legitimately an under the radar finals contender. I mean, this is a team you can look at some of their numbers. I mean, this team is 23rd in pace, so they're running a lot of half court offense, but they're top of the league in 3-point field goals and second in 3-point percentage at 40%. They're shooting 40% as a team from three. That's incredible. I mean, this team, they're making the most threes in the entire league, and they're shooting at the second highest percentage in the league. That's incredible, man. I mean, they got so many. If you look at up and down the roster, they got 7 dudes in double-digit points per game. Even off the bench, I mean, like you said, Jordan Clarkson, he's been great. I mean, they got Joe Ingles coming off the bench. He's been solid, too. He was injured for a while, but he's averaging over 10 a game. Derek Favors was an underrated pickup. I know he's not his stats aren't going to be eye-popping or anything, but he's a guy that, can go out there and play some defense, get some rebounds for you. He's going to hustle. Georges Niang, a good spot-up shooter. I mean, dude, this team is legit, man. What'd you say?
Is it Grayson Allen too? He's been pretty. Oh, he's not on the Jazz anymore. My bad. I was thinking about Georges Niang. He's on Memphis.
Yeah.
He's been good in Memphis.
Yeah, Niang's a good spot up shooter as well.
Yeah.
But I mean, I really think he's, like you said, he started off really slow. Donovan Mitchell lately has been on an absolute tear. This dude he's been absolutely balling lately. I know he's always been a player I've really liked. I really think this dude's a true. If not, he's just on the outside of top 10 in terms of actual talent in the league, or wherever you want to rank him. I think he's just outside the top 10, but I think this dude's a true superstar. I mean, Shaq can say whatever he wants. He's been trashing people all year. I don't really get that. I don't really get the hate from that crew all year. They've been just kind of roasting everybody, and I don't really understand why. There's been a lot of awkward interactions from them, and it's weird because it's always a crew that I've really enjoyed watching or whatever. But whatever. That's besides the point. Donovan Mitchell, though, he's really stepped it up lately. He's shooting over 40% from three, actually shooting just under 41%, and then also 85% from the line, which is a guy that gets to the line a ton as well. So this is big for him. And like you said, their defense off to an incredible start this year. I think that's got a lot to do with Rudy Gobert down there. Like we just said, having an elite rim protector hides a lot of, the defensive flaws. But I think this is a team that's more than that, though. I mean, Royce O'Neal's a good role player. He's a very good wing defender for them. Mike Conley's a good defender. I think Donovan Mitchell's at least an average defender. And then Bogdanovich, maybe not great, but he at least gives some effort out there. And, he hasn't even really been that great so far offensively. So, this team might not even hit their offensive ceiling yet, but it's just a team. I know, it's been, they're always deemed boring, but I really enjoy watching them. I think they play good fundamental basketball. They don't turn the ball over a ton. They shoot the 3-ball a ton. They make it a lot. I don't get what's so boring about this team. Like you said, they're a little, or like I was saying earlier, they're a little bit slower, but they're also really efficient. I think they're fun to watch. They're a good offense, good defensive team that should be taken seriously as a finals contender this year with all their pieces back and all together after the bubble. They struggle a little bit, but.
Yeah, I don't know if they're a finals contender or not. I mean, still, they've played what?
At least a dark horse.
16 games. Yeah, I'd say they're a dark horse. I mean, this is a team, again, going back to before last season, so heading into the 1920 season, they were a team after they got Conley, after they made a ton of moves in the offseason, that a lot of people were like, hey, this team could be a finals contender, and they just really underperformed for much of last season. So this could be a post-hype sleeper team. This is a team, like I said, I mean, the two of us, we were talking, this would probably be like a play-in tournament team, potentially, with how loaded the West was. So I think we were honestly both, at least so far, we appear to be wrong on that. And it's a shorter season, so that might prove beneficial for them. I guess the big concern is an injury going to derail this team? Is COVID safety protocols, as we've seen, derail some other teams? Could that come into play, as with obviously every other franchise? But right now, that they're going to be in every game because of their defense. And as you mentioned, that their scoring's been really, really good. They're shooting with Mitchell, with Clarkson, with Conley, and especially I think the dark horse guy here is Bogdanovich because he still looks like he had the wrist injury, maybe still recovering from that a little bit. But if he can get back fully healthy, I think their offense could be even better as well, which is going to be really great to watch. And it's something that I have seen some people bash the Jazz for is their schedule hasn't been super difficult. If you look at their 4 losses at the moment, at the time of this recording, they lost to Minnesota, not a great loss, and then Phoenix, Brooklyn, and New York. So yeah, some good teams, but they also have some really solid wins. Portland, the Clippers, the Spurs, who've been pretty good, and then in this current winning streak they're currently on right now, they beat teams like the Pistons. They beat the Pelicans twice, who are still a solid team, but they also beat Denver. They beat Atlanta, who's been up and down. They also had a really solid win against Milwaukee. So it's not like they've just played like the Kings and the Pistons every game. They've played some solid teams and they've beaten them. So I think that's kind of a false narrative that I see surrounding the Jazz. They haven't played a ton of good teams because they have proven that they can beat those good teams. So you're talking me into it a little bit, like maybe the Jazz are a dark horse final favorite. But yeah, I think they're still in that Nuggets tier of teams, like just below the Clippers and the Lakers. But as we saw last year, the Nuggets eliminated the Clippers, and no one saw that coming. So I think the Jazz could be in a very similar spot come playoff time.
I mean, I would say they're well above the Nuggets personally. I mean, the Nuggets have kind of been struggling so far. They're kind of starting to figure things out a little bit, getting some wins here. They're only 8-7, right? They're only 8-7 as a team. I think the Jazz fundamentally have looked like a much better team this year.
So far, yeah.
I mean, they look like they're flowing better. You know, Conley was coming off a ton of injuries last year. He looks a lot better this year. I think Donovan Mitchell looks more like the bubble version of himself than he does anything before that. I think Gobert looks better this season. I mean, having Bogdanovich back definitely helps. And obviously Jordan Clarkson, maybe his 17 points per game might not keep up because he's one of those, can get hot for a week, get ice cold for a week players or whatever. But he's a guy that definitely provides a lot of scoring punch off the bench and a guy they definitely needed. And this was what I was worried. I was worried their bench wasn't going to be able to compete. And that was one of the main reasons.
Yeah.
It wasn't really a question for me with their starting lineup. I figured they'd have a solid starting 5. You need some depth of some sort when you're a team like the Jazz. And I didn't think they had that, but they definitely do. I mean, they've had multiple guys step up, Clarkson being one of them. Ingles coming off the bench is a very interesting move for the team as well. I really like this team, and they've been fun to watch too. Underratedly fun to watch. So I'm excited to see what they do moving forward. I think they're a finals contender, but if you don't have anything else to add, I'll get into my next point now. I want to talk about another team in the West. We're going apparently all Western Conference today, but this is a team. They're not going to win the finals. They may not even make the playoffs, but I want to give some love. It's a little bit of player. It's a little bit team. It's definitely not the team that I'm giving love to, but it's Steph Curry and the Golden State Warriors. I think if this team makes the playoffs, Stephen Curry deserves to win the Most Valuable Player award, hands down, in my opinion. I mean, this is a roster. I think this roster is just totally void of, a true second option for this team. Wiggins is a decent player. I mean, Oubre, you say what you want. He's fine, I guess, but he can't really score. Wiseman's still developing. Draymond Green can't play any offense anymore. I really think it comes down to how good Stephen Curry is. And obviously he's been great. That's how far this team's going to go. And I mean, this dude's averaging 28 points per game, 6 assists, 5 rebounds. I mean, he's only shooting 37% from 3, but he got out to a little bit of a slow start. He's starting to pick it up now. Shooting 45% from the floor. That's pretty solid as well. But I really think Curry is playing one of, if not the best seasons of his entire career. He's having I mean, if you look at some of these games that they played against good defenses, they're basically just doubling him from half court on. And it's been tough for him to, get it going in certain games. He's had a couple games where he's had really rough shooting performances, but he's still finding a way to get his teammates involved despite them not being able to actually score the ball because, it's a team that isn't that great offensively besides him. Wiggins, like I said, is playing pretty well, but everybody else is really struggling on the offensive side of the ball. They really need another option like Klay Thompson to come back because he really takes a lot of the pressure off Curry. But I really think the way he's playing this season, he's definitely in the discussion for MVP right now. It just depends on if this team can, get to the playoffs and and do something when they get there. Because they're 8-7 right now. They're 4th in their division, but they're hovering right around that playoff race right now. So definitely a team that's going to be interesting to see. They're at the 9 seed right now, but they're tied with the Mavs. They're tied with the Nuggets right now. I think it's going to be interesting to see if they can sneak into that spot. Because having Draymond back, it helps. He's a good defender, but he provides literally nothing on the offensive side of the ball besides, in terms of scoring, at least he provides absolutely nothing. But, I think the way Curry's playing out there this year, getting his teammates involved, scoring at a high rate, I really think he deserves MVP love this year. I don't know if you agree with that, or if they make the playoffs, you agree with what I'm saying, that he actually deserves it. I truly believe that he is one of, if not arguably the best player in this entire league. He's incredible. I'm so happy he's back, man, from the injury.
It's tough with the MVP, just because outside of Westbrook a couple years ago when he averaged a triple-double, it seems like more often than not the MVP goes to a team that was at least in the top 3 in their conference. So in that regard, it's tough for Curry because, I agree with everything you said about Curry. He's been really, really good. But I still look at this team as being, we had them as a play-in tournament team. I still view them as a play-in tournament type of team in that 7-10 range. I think they'll get there, especially if Curry. Big concern throughout his career with Curry is, can he stay healthy? If he stays healthy, his ankles hold up. I think last year when he had the hand injury, or I think it was his wrist. If that holds up, I think he's definitely an MVP candidate, and the Warriors are definitely going to be a play-in tournament team, and it wouldn't surprise me if they end up winning that play-in tournament. But in terms of their overall team, they're a pretty average offense, and they're below average on defense, and that's not great, and that's going to put you right in that play-in conversation. I will say Andrew Wiggins hasn't looked awful. I think you mentioned him there briefly. I'm not going to write up. Yeah, he's averaging 17 a game, 5 rebounds. He's actually looked pretty good defensively as well, which has always been a little bit of a concern with Wiggins. Surprisingly, he's leading the team in blocks with a block and a half, so that's a little bit surprising from Andrew Wiggins. But outside of Wiggins, I really just haven't been super impressed by anyone else on the team. I think what Steve Kerr and the coaching staff really have to do is just let James Wiseman run, because it seems like he got off to a really good start, and now they haven't really played him as much. Hasn't got as many touches, and I think part of it was with Draymond Green coming back, but I think you got to just let Wiseman go to work. I think he's a really talented player, and I think if he's able to get more touches and he can be more of a pick and roll partner with Curry, be more of a complementary piece, kind of like what we saw in the first few games with Golden State, I think he could be. I think the Warriors could maybe sneak into that 5 or 6 seed, and I think Curry could get some MVP love because the stats are going to be there for Curry. The only thing preventing his MVP case, in my opinion, is how good is this team going to be? And I think Wiseman could play a huge role in that, because Green, he's just old. Like, he's not a bad player. He's a great leader on the court, and he's a great facilitator on offense. Good defensively, but maybe just start getting more touches to Wiseman rather than having Draymond Green out there. And I think you could even, we saw I don't know if you saw that clip going around of him telling James Wiseman to go at Marc Gasol, and Marc Gasol was literally standing right next to him. That was a pretty good clip. But I think Green would be okay with giving off some more touches to Wiseman. And I think maybe part of it, too, isn't just the coaching. I think maybe Wiseman, based on that clip, he just needs to be more aggressive. It needs to get his touches, to demand the ball, because I think he's a really good player on both sides of the court, and I think he could be the key for the Warriors taking that next step. Because we've already seen they've played some quality teams, they've beaten some quality teams. Obviously, they beat the Lakers a couple nights ago. Curry had that monster 62-point game as well. So they are a good team, and I think they are going to be in a playoffs following the play-in tournament. But if they get Wiseman a little bit going, like I said, that'll help both Curry's MVP chances as well as the team's overall outlook for sure.
Yeah, I like your points on Wiseman. I think, he struggled with a little bit of foul trouble as well. I think that's a part of it. Also, maybe just struggled, he's a rookie. He's going to make some mistakes, but this is a team that, they got some veterans on there. Maybe they're trying to get, guys with a little bit more feel for the game out there. Wiseman's definitely got all the talent in the world. Don't get absolutely. He's been a good rim protector for them when he's out there. Despite the fouls, he has been fouling a lot, but he's been doing a good job not allowing a ton of points in the paint. He's a really good rim runner. He's got some athleticism as well. I like his length out there. I agree. I think the more he improves, the further he steps up his game this year, the better they're going to be. And I'm not sure he's going to get to that level where they really need him to get to that 5-6 seed, but I think it's possible. At the same time, I think it's possible Curry just carries them to a 5 or 6 seed because he's one of the best players, the best shooter of all time, in my opinion, and one of the best players in this league right now. So I think that's definitely a possibility that he just absolutely carries them to the playoffs, or, making it without being a play-in team. I think it's very possible. Especially with teams like the Blazers being ahead of them, they could fall off here. And Dame's in a very similar situation where he doesn't have a ton of talent around him right now. Just Curry's got to do it for the whole year rather than him doing it for part of the year. That's why I think he deserves a little bit. Their numbers are very similar. I think Curry is the better point guard for sure, despite me being a big Damian Lillard fan. And he's also been the better player of the two of them this season so far, on carrying a worse roster to about the same record. But I really think, I just have a lot of respect for Curry. I mean, it might be a little bit biased just because I really want to see him win another MVP award. It may not happen, but I truly believe if this team is anywhere near the top 5-6 seeds in the league, I think he definitely deserves, at least, if not consideration, deserves the MVP award.
It's definitely there because there's no clear-cut favorite this year, I don't think, as with other years. It seems like I think Durant is the main guy I've been seeing around.
Some Embiid love.
Yes, Embiid, because the Sixers are the top team in the East right now as well. But even with both of those guys, Curry has the advantage of he's the guy on the team, right? With the Sixers, Embiid's got Simmons, and with and then with the Nets, obviously, they got Durant, they got Irving, they got Harden. So that could take away from some of his stats, and they could look at that. Similar to like last year when we were looking at LeBron and Anthony Davis, it's hard to separate the two, so that could happen too. That could also be going Curry's favor. But I think this was a team that I'd really love to see make a move, make a trade, maybe get a DeMar DeRozan, maybe get a Victor Oladipo, maybe get a Bradley Beal if the Wizards are like, yeah, we're done with this season. That would be really awesome. I think the Warriors are having more of a long-term approach and really wanting to build around James Wiseman. Maybe they trade Curry. I'm just kidding. That's probably not going to happen.
That will not happen. There's no way.
But yeah, I would like them to make another move and get another number 2 type of guy. Beal's number 1 guy. That'd be a huge deal. I don't really know if that's going to happen, but they get a good player in a DeRozan or Oladipo, but not like a top guy like a Beal. So I think that'd be really interesting to see for sure. But I will head out east now. I mean, we spent a lot of time out there in the West. We'll head out east. My first one was a little more positive about the Jazz. I'm going to get negative here. I'm talking about the Atlanta Hawks, specifically Trae Young. And he is by far, and we talked about the overrated episode that we did last summer. I just hate watching this guy play basketball. I mean, he's bad. He's bad for basketball. I mean, he's a good player, but I'm just going to straight up say he's bad for basketball. I mean, this guy, I think he averages over 10 free throw attempts per game. He's doing the stupid Harden crap where he's backing into people. He's, doing one of these, and then the guy falls into him, and then he goes like this, and he gets foul shots. It's just not fun to watch. He's very ball dominant. He is a good playmaker when he wants to be, but he's just very ball dominant, and it's not fun to watch. And I think I still stand by what I said before. I think he's still a little bit overrated. I think it's one of those things where he's getting all the usage and he's getting all the touches. And I think if he was on a better team than the Hawks, if he was on a good team, even the Bucks or something like that, where he's not the number 1 guy, I don't think his stats would be as insane. I think for people saying, "Oh, is Trae Young or Luka better?" I think that's just a ridiculous argument. It's clearly Luka Doncic. So it's probably some bias, but I've seen a lot of other people talking about just how tough this guy is to watch. And it's not fun basketball. And it sucks because I think the Hawks have some really good pieces in DeAndre Hunter, in John Collins, who reportedly maybe wants out of town after him and Trae Young have had some philosophical differences on what they want to do offensively. Even Clint Capella, I mean, last night he had a triple-double with 10 blocks, and the game before that he had 26 rebounds. Pretty insane there by Capella. And they got guys like, your Reddishes, your Hurters, who are decent players as well. With the Hawks specifically, I'd be really interested to see what happens when they get Bogdanovich and Gallinari back, 2 of their big, and even in Rondo as well. When
Gallo's back now too. He just played last night for 10 minutes. Yeah,
but when they get him back to full strength. Yeah. once they get those guys back at full throttle, those are their big offseason acquisitions that we talked so much about. The reason the Hawks were projected to be a 6th or 7th seed and really haven't lived up to that. I'm really interested to see what those guys do, as well as just if they end up moving John Collins, because it seems like he doesn't really want to be there anymore. But in terms specifically with Trae Young, I mean, I just feel like this is a guy I don't think you can win with because he doesn't play defense. He's a little bit better defensively this year, but he doesn't play defense. And I think with him as your number one guy, I just don't see it happening because I think it's just bad. It's just not fun to watch. And even players and coaches have said the same thing. Even Steve Nash, I think, straight up said this isn't basketball because Trae Young is just leaning into guys, getting stupid fouls. And I just wish one of these games the refs would just put their whistles in their mouths and just say, no, we're not calling that crap. And that's what I really want to see. But I've seen a lot of other people talking about Trae Young, and that's why I wanted to bring it up. But I'm not sure. I know you don't think you're a huge Trae Young fan either, but I wanted to bring this up to see if it was bothering you as well.
Yeah, this was my third point as well for the entire the actual same point. My point was Trae Young is even more insufferable to watch than James Harden ever was in his career, and they will never, at any team with him on the roster, will never win anything at all. I think this dude is the most overrated player in the NBA. I don't think he's top 10 point guard. That's my bold opinion. I don't think he's top 10 point guard. He can't play a lick of defense. He of course, this comes after he just went off for 43 points last night, too. So it's bad timing. But before that, this dude hasn't been doing anything on the offensive end of the ball, too. You know, I know you said he's a good facilitator. He turns the ball over a ton. He's a turnover machine. He's a usage machine. He's an everything machine besides being a good basketball player. And that's the problem. I don't think he's even a star player. I think he's just a guy that gets numbers. Only cares about his stats. He, like I said, doesn't play a lick. He has been a tiny bit better defensively this year in terms of his defensive rating, but he's still one of the worst in the league. I think any other point guard just babies him out there on the offensive end of the ball. And when you're not playing any defense, you have to be the utmost elite offensive player for me to actually respect it. Like James Harden. I mean, I don't love James Harden. I think he's always been a little bit overrated. But at the same time, he's been one of the best offensive players in the league, and there's no question about that. The difference is Trae Young, is just he's not that efficient. He's shooting like 30% from three this year, which is absolutely absurd. The amount of shots he's getting up there and the amount of talent this roster has. I mean, like you just listed off with 7+ players in this league. I mean, Gallinari, Reddish, Hunter, Collins, Capella, all these guys are above average players. A lot of them above average offensive player. I mean, Collins, I would say, is a borderline star player in terms of offensive abilities. He's a guy who's about a 20-point per game scorer. Gallinari also career usually averages around 17 a game. A good scoring guy. Probably going to come off the bench for most of the year, but still going to be a guy that's interesting. Even Kevin Huerter this year is playing some good basketball as well. This is a team loaded with talent, but I think the problem is Trae Young, and he is absolutely dreadful to watch with the ball in his hands. He has one of the highest usage rates in the league. I mean, I know a lot of point guards have that high usage rate. It makes sense that he has the ball in his hands a lot, but he's just not very good. I mean, I really just don't think he's that great. I think you look at guards like De'Aaron Fox, even a Jamal Murray, despite him being a little bit bad this year. I'd much rather have guys like that on my team. I mean, John Morant, I would straight up trade Trae Young. I mean, I wouldn't do it if I was the Grizzlies, but I'd much rather have John Morant than I would Trae Young. I think Trae Young, not a star, not a superstar. I think he's just a guy. I think he'll never win anything. I think they're going to struggle to even make like a 5-6 seed with him as their star player. I just don't see it. He's undersized. He gets bullied by every other point guard in the league. He obviously he's a good scorer offensively. He's still a good offensive player. And last year, he was one of the top offensive rating guys in the league, but just played absolutely dreadful defense as well. He's improved a little bit defensively, but on the offensive side of the ball has not been anywhere near what he was to start the season. So I think this is just a guy that I hate watching him play basketball too. He makes the Hawks a lot more unenjoyable to watch, despite them having a lot of players that I do like. And it really stinks because I thought he had a little bit more promise coming in, and he just hasn't been that player. I think he's a ball hog and not a team guy.
Yeah, and he's still young, so he still has potential to improve his outside skills besides just being. And I was about to say just being a shooter, but really, I mean, I'm glad you mentioned it there. Yeah, his 3-point percentage is 34% right now, which isn't bad, but it is.
Just they go 7 for 10 from three before
that really helped
last game. And that helped out. He was at 29% before that.
Yeah, and I think that it's difficult with him because you think, oh well, he's a really good shooter, and that'll help him out. But really, he's not a great shooter. He just hits a lot of threes because of his usage, and he gets a ton of touches. And you look at a guy we just talked about, Steph Curry, who is also a high usage guy, gets a lot of stuff. But the difference is he makes his threes, he gets his other guys involved. He's a team
Doesn't
guy.
turn the ball over as much.
Yeah, he doesn't turn the ball over as much. And I like with Trae Young, it just seems like his teammates just genuinely just don't like playing with him. And John Collins said as much in the I think we talked about it a little bit last week. The locker room incident with him and Young having an offensive differences during a team meeting, and it resulted in him, Capella, and Trae Young having a personal discussion. So this team is just hanging on by the threads at the moment. They've gotten a couple nice wins, but the Pistons, I mean, they were down by the Pistons by like 20 points in the fourth quarter, and the Pistons just choked it away. And this team, again, was supposed to be a legit Eastern Conference playoff contender. And when you're losing by 20 to the Pistons, I don't care if you're winning. If you end up winning the game, that's not good for your team. And I think a lot of that blame has to fall on Trae Young. Like I said, he's still got a lot of way to go. He could improve for sure, but all those guys you mentioned, De'Aaron Fox, John Morant. I do like the Grizzlies, but De'Aaron Fox, man, I wish he was on the Hawks right now. I mean, him on the Hawks would be awesome. I wish Trae Young was on the Kings, where he's got no pieces, no help, and you get De'Aaron Fox on the Hawks, and they just go. And I think I think a guy like Fox, if he was on the Hawks, I think they'd be a really, really good team and fun to watch. And Trae Young just isn't that guy. And I think he's got to make some serious adjustments here. And maybe that starts with coaching. I know Lloyd Pierce, their head coach, there's a lot of rumors of him being on the hot seat. Maybe he doesn't make it out of this season with a job, which would be unfortunate. But maybe that's what stirs Trae Young to improve his game. But he's got to do something, because this team is going to be stuck in mediocrity for the entirety of Trae Young's prime, unless they get him another star, or they do something drastic, or they improve Young. Rather than just moving him to the number 2 or number 3 option. But like I said, I've heard a lot of people talking about that, and I wanted to get my take off on that as well.
Yeah,
which Trae Young's overrated.
Yeah, extremely. I mean, I agree even more to an extent than you, and I'm definitely glad we're on the same page with that. I'll get into my last point here. It's kind of similar to your Utah one, and it started off as an under the radar finals contenders. My first two, I mean, they're not really super under the radar. Philadelphia. They're playing some good bet. I feel like people aren't giving them enough respect. I agree.
Like they were almost one of my points too.
The Nets, the Bucks. I think the Sixers are definitely a very interesting team with Embiid playing at an MVP level. Simmons, maybe hasn't gotten it going on the offensive end as much. He's been good all around though. He always provides great additional stuff besides that. Tobias Harris playing well. Having Seth Curry back now is helping. They're getting some production from Maxey off the bench as well. Dwight Howard providing some good minutes. I think this is a very interesting team. The Jazz were one of mine in there as well. And then I'll give you my super dark horse team here, the Dallas Mavericks. I think they are extremely interesting. All right, so they're 8-7 this year.
This is your Luka bias showing.
No. It's not truly. All right, so Luka, obviously, he's a great player. He can't do it all by himself, and he's not a perfect player. Don't get me wrong. I know we were just trashing Trae Young, and Luka's obviously a lot better. He turns the ball over a lot still, and he's not the greatest outside shooter. It's not all about Luka. I think they're 8-7 right now, but they're one of the top teams in this league defensively. I mean, they had like the third highest defensive rating as a team so far this season, and that's without they're missing 4 rotational guys right now. They're missing Josh Richardson, Maxi Kleber, Dorian Finney-Smith, and then Dwight Powell. I mean, these are all guys that provide solid minutes for this team. I really think, and they got Kristaps back too, and they've looked like a different team since he came back. He's starting to find a rhythm now. They're starting to get some secondary scoring. Trey Burke, Jalen Brunson, all these guys are providing some decent scoring for them. But they are super good defensively, and I'm not really sure if that's going to translate throughout the whole season. But I think with all these guys coming back, Josh Richardson, Tim Hardaway, these are secondary scorers that really need to take the load off those main two. I think this team has a legitimate shot. Maybe not. Finals contender isn't the right way to put it. It was kind of just a clickbaity, headline for me. I just want to talk about them, in the same sense as they're a team. Maybe I just don't think they're getting talked about very much this season. I haven't really seen a whole lot of. I really haven't even seen much of Luka talk this year. I know he was on your overrated list just because the media talks about him so much, but I really haven't seen as much from him this year. Maybe that's just me not seeing it, but I haven't seen it. What'd you say?
mainly been negative talk
Yeah,
about his
right.
conditioning, about how he's not like basically everything you said there. Conditioning,
Oh, I mean,
not a great outside shooter. Dallas has struggled out of the gate for the most part. That's been the main headlines with him. It's not really been his. Oh, look at it! Look at this Luka step back, like you'd see on ESPN all the time last year.
right.
So
I think they're starting to find their stride though. I don't think it's all because of him. I think he's playing good though. I don't really have a problem with it. He's not a perfect player, don't get me wrong, but he's still a very good elite player in this league, a top 10 guy for sure. And a guy that definitely I think will end up being in that MVP conversation. Maybe more because of his numbers, but I think he's a great player. But I think some of these secondary options are really stepping up for them though. And I just kind of wanted to talk about it, not in the same sense as a team like Philly and Utah, but this is a team that I wouldn't want to run. I mean, you saw the Clippers; they had a really hard time getting them out of the playoffs last year, and that was with missing a lot of pieces. No Kristaps even for half that series, and they still had a hard time even like just the Mavericks are hanging around all those games against the Clippers. I really think this team is going to be a tough elimination in the playoffs. I think they're definitely going to make the playoffs. Like I said, they're playing some great defense this year, which is weird to say about. They're also not turning the ball over either. Their outside shooting hasn't been fantastic, more middle of the road. A lot of their other stats on the offensive end, middle of the road. But I feel like some of these guys coming back could boost that inside, top 15, top 10. And with their top 10 defensive rating, I think this is a team to look out for. At least maybe a playoff winning team. I think they're interesting though for sure. I don't know how you feel about that. Obviously, not a true finals contender. That's why I said a super dark horse finals contender because it's not going to happen. But it's a team that I'm very interested to see what they do moving forward. With these guys coming off the COVID list, with some of their pieces getting healthier, Kristaps Porzingis per se. I think it's interesting.
it's interesting. I wouldn't say they're a final contender, like you said. That's a pretty hot take. I would say they're much more in the they're in the same range for me as a team like the Warriors, where I think they have a little more upside than the Warriors do. But I think they're probably gonna be like a 5 or 6 seed, and then probably a first, maybe wins a playoff series, but most likely a first round exit. That's at least my opinion on them.
Fair.
It is promising that they do have a top 10 defense. Because that was the big problem with them last year was their defense. The only problem was last year they had, in terms of offensive efficiency, the greatest offense of all time, and this year they're below average right now.
Right.
So if they do get some of those pieces back, like you said, Josh Richardson, Kristaps, I don't know about that though. He always gets hurt, and that's a big concern for me.
Yeah.
If you're counting on him to be the number 2 guy for Luka in the future, it worries me that he seems like he gets hurt every time he steps on the floor. But anyway, this season specifically, if he stays healthy, if you get Richardson back, I think they could be, if they improve their offensively, which obviously we saw last year, they had the potential to be really good offensively, then yeah, I could see what you're saying. Maybe they win a playoff series. Maybe they're like the Denver Nuggets last year and they sneak into the conference finals. I think they're going to need a lot of things to bounce their way personally. And I don't think Luka, unless the Mavs just go off here and they end up being a top 4 seed and Luka is just losing his mind, I don't see him being an MVP candidate. I honestly, I would see Curry being an MVP candidate before I see Luka. Even though Luka I think he was my MVP pick going into this season. It's just because Dallas has been more or less pretty disappointing for the most part. And a lot of it has to go with injuries, COVID safety protocols, which has been unfortunate for them. But I can see they have the potential for sure. They're a young team. I don't know. I think I'm a little more skeptical than you just because their offense just hasn't looked great. And Luka, I think more and more he gets into shape, he'll be better, but he hasn't looked. His conditioning's been off, and it's been very apparent that he didn't come into the season in the best of shape. And I think that's shown both in terms of his success as well as the greater team success.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. Luka, maybe it looks a little bit more sluggish coming out of the gate, and that definitely might have to do with his condition. Not as long of a. I mean, everybody had to deal with it. Not as long of a break for the players. He did have to basically will them to the play, to winning games. And he was also, you have to factor in, he was also injured. He sprained his ankle in that last series against the Clippers as well. I think that definitely could add some. Maybe he was rehabbing that. Took a little while to get back into shape. Everybody has injuries though. Not a ton of excuses for him. I don't want to make a bunch from. He's still a really good player. I think he'll improve with the team. I mean, they're 8-7 now. They're starting to turn it around. They're 6-4 their last 10. They struggled out of the gate for sure. And don't get me wrong. Luka looked bad to start the season. I think he's starting to turn it around a little bit. He's shooting a little bit better from outside the arc. I think that has to do a little bit with Kristaps coming back, providing some more scoring punch for them. You know, getting a guy like Josh Richardson, a guy, you know, career 14-point per game guy. I think he's a guy that provides some punch. You know, having Jalen Brunson back, you know, he was out for a while. Trey Burke. All these guys, I think, are helping the load offensively. I am very encouraged by their defensive start, though. You know, I think maybe it could be a little bit of a mirage. Maybe teams just aren't shooting the ball very well against them. But, you know, if they can keep up that top 10 defensive rating, I really think that offensive rating, you know, like you said, greatest offensive of all time last season. They're not going to be that this year, clearly. I was obviously an outlier, but I think this team can definitely improve their offensive rating up to a top 10 team. And then in that case, if you're top 10 both, it's going to be an annoying team to eliminate in the playoffs. And like you said, it's more of like, that's kind of more of the range I see them in, that Denver Nuggets, maybe even a little bit more dark horse than that. But, you know, maybe they can make that surprising run to the conference finals. You know, maybe like the Blazers did a few years ago as well, a team that you just don't really expect to make that much noise in the playoffs actually gets decently far into the playoffs just because they're a tough matchup for a lot of teams that can beat you in a lot of different ways. So I like them in that sense. Yeah, they're not winning the finals, but, you know, I didn't want to, you know, they're definitely not in that Utah or Philly. You know, maybe we're disrespecting those teams a little bit by putting them, you know, in a similar tier.
Yeah.
I just kind of wanted to bring up a couple more teams that I've been interested by. You know, Philly off to a really good start. Embiid playing some unbelievable basketball. Another guy that very much deserves MVP consideration for the way he's played so far this season. And their team as a whole has been really impressive. Tobias Harris playing some good basketball as well for them. But, you know, them, the Jazz, the Mavericks, I mean, the first two awesome starts. The Mavericks struggling, but I've been encouraged with some of their underlying numbers, you know, defensively especially.
Yeah. It's really promising to see that they showed last year. Obviously, they have the potential to be really good offensively, and the fact that this year
awful defensively last year.
And the fact that they've shown this year that they're good defensively, we already know they have the potential to be good offensively. So they just have to kind of live up to that potential a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is another team I would love to see make a move, make a trade, get another guy, maybe someone just to facilitate alongside Luka, whether it be
Oladipo would be an interesting.
Oladipo, DeRozan, guys like that. I think they do have some pieces too that they could move potentially. Whether it be Tim Hardaway Jr. has got off to a good start.
He has gone off to a really good start.
And that'd be interesting to see. But I'm going to head out back to the East. I was going to talk about one young East guard, R.J. Barrett with the Knicks. The Knicks, who, again, could have been a whole topic in themselves. They're currently the 8th seed, but they have the best defense in the league right now, which is pretty nuts. But R.J. Barrett, I think you mentioned it at the top during our previews when we were talking about the Knicks, about how he might have been a bust. I think he's been really good in some ways. I think he's even been a little better than Zion, at least defensively. He's shown a lot. Promise than Zion. Zion has the offensive numbers, but has been atrocious defensively. And Barrett's been good. Not a great 3-point shooter, under 30%, but he's got 18 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists. He's been a pretty good player. But I'm going to go to a different guy, also Eastern Conference, young guard, who I think this guy could be most improved player in the league right now. And I think a lot of people are talking about him.
I know who it is.
I know you probably know who I'm going. He's had 2 huge games against the premier team in the NBA in the Brooklyn Nets, and it's Collin Sexton. I mean, this guy is insane. I mean, look, he's improved every year. So this is his 3rd season. He had 16 points his rookie year, 20 points per game last year, which is pretty. I think that went underrated. I mean, I don't think.
Yeah, he ended the year off. A lot of people, no one watched the Cavs last year, especially in the second half of the year, and he really went ballistic. I don't know if you remember, he was averaging over. I would say 28 a game after the new year or something. I saw some crazy number on Twitter the other day, just how many points. It was after his 40-point game, just like a points per game since last January or something like that. And
I think it was just a mix of nobody's watching the Cavs, and as we were getting closer and closer to the shutdown, people had more important things on their mind than Collin Sexton and Cavs basketball. So it went really under the radar. But so he had 20 points last year, and this year he missed a few games, but across 10 games he's averaging almost 27 points a game. I mean, that's nuts. Assist numbers, only 4 assists, but that is also an increase over his first 2 seasons. Almost a steal and a half per game. Under 2 turnovers a game, which is also lower than his first 2 seasons in the league as well. rebounding, he's a guard, so he's not going to rebound a ton. So it'd be nice to see those complementary numbers get a little bit better. But what really stood out to me was he's shooting almost 47% from 3-point range. I mean, that is absolutely insane. I mean, like we talked about how Trae Young gets the nomination as being a super good 3-point shooter, and Collin Sexton's shooting 13% better than Young is this year from 3-point range. I mean, that's insane. He also just scored. He went off against the Nets in their first game in overtime. He was the reason they won that game. He scored 20 unanswered points across the 2 overtimes to lead the Cavs to victory. He had a sweet put back reverse layup that got them to overtime, as well as a step back 3 in the second overtime to lead the Cavs to victory. He had 3 or 4 like contested threes in a row. One of them was over
Kyrie.
One over was Joe Harris, but who cares? The other ones were against Durant, were against Kyrie, as you mentioned. I mean, this is a guy, the Cavs are unfortunately a bottom. I think they're the second worst offensive in the league, but they are a top 3 defense in the league. And Sexton, I mean, if he can keep playing like this, and the Cavs are currently at the 5th seed in the Eastern Conference as well. If Sexton keep playing like this, get the offense going a little bit. I think Darius Garland came back last night. If he gets his backcourt mate with him again, if Kevin Love gets healthy again, the Cavs, I mean, they could be a serious threat here. And they are also a team, as we mentioned earlier, with Drummond, with McGee. They can make a trade here and get another guy in that could help them right now. Those trades might be more centered on draft picks, so maybe the players they're acquiring won't be super good to help their chances. But if you got a guy like Collin Sexton, this is a guy who I think a lot of people, I think he got called out by, I think, J.R. Smith his rookie year for not being that good. A lot of people were like, after his rookie season, he's not going to be that great. He's showing he could be a top 2 or 3 guy on a really good team for sure. And I think as he's shown over his first 3 seasons, he's only getting better. And I think deserves to be recognized for sure.
Yeah, Sexton, definitely a very interesting topic here, because I think Sexton has made massive leaps, and both on the court and like you watch him play, he looks like just a totally different player from his rookie year, and the numbers stack it up. Yeah, I mean, this is a dude that can be your primary scorer, honestly. That's what it looks like right now. I mean, he looks like a great – he's been shooting the ball great. I mean, I've been watching more Cavs basketball this year than I ever even I mean, it might have to do a little bit with League Pass, but I'm watching a lot of Cavs basketball, weirdly enough. And I've enjoyed watching Sexton play. I know he was out for a while. That I kind of stopped watching him, but he was basically him and the Sexland backcourt. Was the reason I was watching. A ton of Cavs basketball. I mean, I think having Garland back maybe decreases Sexton's numbers and his usage a little bit, but at the same time, I think it helps him be a little bit more efficient, because I think Garland is another very promising young player. I like him a lot too as more of that primary playmaker for the offense. Sexton definitely has to work on his playmaking ability a little bit. Yeah. I think that's the area he can make the most improvements. I think he is a good defender as well. He's annoying defensively for other people. He's underrated. He's like a little bit of a pest. I like him.
That's why he's the young bull.
Sure. Right. But at the same time, I think besides his playmaking, I really think he's even taken massive leaps in his playmaking. I think that's an area he really can improve in. But I mean, you look at his scoring, it's gotten better every year. You look at his defense, continues to get better. Just a player I really like, and I think has been getting, totally disrespected throughout the league through his first 3 seasons, including this year. I mean, people are finally starting to talk about it, but he was playing really good before, he went out with the injury. He comes back from the injury, and his first game drops a 42 bomb on the net on supposedly the best team in the East as well. So
the best defense for sure, but yeah, it was still impressive.
But at the same time, still extremely impressive that he was able to basically just will this young, not as talented Cavs team to a crazy back-to-back win. I mean, last night he was good too. He had 25 points, 8 assists. So, I mean, another great game for Sexton. But, I mean, the Cavs, I'm assuming they're going to fall off a little bit. You can't be that bad offense. I think their defense, will regress to the mean a little bit. Maybe their offense improves a little bit with Garland back as well. I expect them to be, a playoff team, but it's kind of good. It might almost be a good thing for them not to be quite, maybe for them to struggle a little bit, because if they get too good too fast, I don't think this is a truly, a team that truly is a competitor right now. But I think give it a year or two. Don't re-sign Drummond. Maybe you can attract a big time free agent or something like that. You can make a big trade for a free agent. Use some of these assets that they have. I think they can make a big. Then they make a big playoff push. I think a guy like Jared Allen could be their big of the future. You know, they got him for really cheap. They probably won't have to pay him an absolute fortune to keep him around. Sexton, I mean, he's going to be due for a contract soon. Going to have to pay him, but it shouldn't be a super max deal as well for him. So, you know, they'd have room to, you know, bring out a forward, bringing out another star to this young core. They just got to find a guy that would be the right fit. I think maybe a front court member, you know, that isn't Andre Drummond, isn't Kevin Love, just a guy that's better than both of them. Could be an interesting piece for them. Maybe they bring LeBron back after he's done with the Lakers, you know, and when he's 45 years old. Probably not, but, you know, it's very interesting to see this Cavs team, you know, both the Cavs and the Knicks, both interesting teams to see them, you know, having early season success. Both teams that we totally wrote off going into the year. Oh, these teams are trash. We barely need to talk about the Cavs. You know, obviously we should have been talking about this team a little bit more, and that might be on us. But I think a lot of people were in that same boat. Where these are trash teams. Nobody cares. Who cares about these teams? No, these are legitimate, like at least play-in teams for sure at this point. Both these teams should be in the play-in tournament at least. I think one of them will sneak into one of those top 6 seeds, though, for sure.
Yeah, I think there's a chance. They're probably going to be in the play-in tournament, but I think that's still a win for a Cavs team that I think we, like you said, we both had them clearly as the the worst team, or if not the second worst team in the Eastern Conference. So that's a huge success there. I think we didn't even mention Sexton last week when we did our most improved player. I think Sexton deserves some serious recognition there as well. And the Cavs, I mean, looking in the future, I mean, that's a solid. I mean, Sexton, Garland, they had Isaac Okoro as well, and then Jared Allen at center they just acquired in the Nets trade. That's a solid nucleus right there. They really just need another backcourt guy, as you mentioned, but they got pieces. They got Larry Nance, JaVale McGee, Kevin Love, Andre Drummond that they could trade for something else, either in picks or either in other young, promising players. So, and also just getting that cap space off their books as well will really help them out. But I think Sexton's really gotten some much needed juice in the Cavs basketball that I think's been missing since LeBron was there. And I think he's looked really good. Going head to head against Kyrie with his number on was really fun to watch. And I'm 100% agree with you. I'm watching way more Cavs basketball than I ever thought, and a lot of it has to do with Collin Sexton. So I think the sky's the limit for this team. But did you have anything else you wanted to add here before we wrap this episode up?
No, this was you know, yet again another fun week of basketball talk. A lot of interesting storylines. I'm sure we'll have some more, whether the Mavs are the new finals favorites next week. I come in with that hot fact, or, you know, the Cavs continue to win games. You know, these are going to be interesting discussions that we may continue through next week.
Yeah, and with the shorter season, every week just a little bit more. So the Cavs obviously back-to-back wins against the Nets, are top 5 seeded in the East. They could go on a losing streak just as easily next week and be out of the playoff picture completely, and we'd look like a bunch of fools. But only time will tell on that. But once again, we are the Zone Defense Podcast. Make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Spotify and Twitter at Zone Defense Pod, and search us on Apple Podcasts. Smash that like button and be sure to drop a comment down below. We love seeing all your thoughts and responding to as many as we can. Whether you think Collin Sexton is the most improved player, or you think Chris is pretty nuts for thinking the Mavs are going to be a finals contender, or if you think I'm pretty nuts for thinking the Jazz could be a final contender as well, be sure to let us know, and we'll be sure to reply to all those. Also, the Super Bowl is right around the corner, so we're going to be doing some NFL Super Bowl previews, as well as Chris mentioned at the top of the show, this Zone Defense Basketball Hour will also be a new weekly episode that'll be out probably early each week. So I'll be sure to check all those out. But thank you for listening to this episode, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.